Hello everyone, I am Jason Alcott, author of the upcoming book, The Sewing Principle, and today we're going to talk about our choices. We're just going to touch on the topic of our choices and decision making. But before we do, if you haven't already had the opportunity to hit the subscribe button below, please do. It really does help to get the video out there. Thank you to everyone that has already subscribed. It is greatly appreciated. Did you ever read those choose your own adventure books when you were younger or a kid? My parents did an absolutely incredible job. Shout out mom and dad, thank you so much, of instilling in my sisters and I this sort of love and passion for reading. I love to read. I still do to this day, but I love to read fiction, nonfiction, and they did an amazing job of that. But I remember reading these choose your own adventure books. They were always sort of fictional and they were telling a story. And what would happen is you'd be reading along and you'd come to a page and get to the bottom of the page and be like, all right, if you choose to go on the jungle cruise, go to page 28. Or if you choose to get on the airplane, jump to page 45. And you sort of had to make this big decision about what part of the book you were going to read next, like what part you thought was going to be the best adventure. And I remember enjoying those books, but also being like kind of frustrated by them because I always wanted to read the whole book. I didn't want to miss anything. So I would read down one sort of path and one adventure, and I'd be like, oh shoot, that didn't end the way I wanted it to, or I guess I'm done. And I'd be like, I don't want to miss anything. So I'd go back to that sort of choice or decision and I'd read through another part of the book. And it was just sort of this kind of funny thing. We definitely don't get the opportunity to do that in real life. But I thought about it in terms of our choices. And I'm like, well, wouldn't that be nice if I could go back and be like, I'd really like to make that decision over again. With the big choices, we don't. But with some of the small choices, we at least get those opportunities to make corrective actions. And that's what really got me thinking about what I wanted to touch on today. I've heard it mentioned in a number of different books and articles and speeches. When it comes to our choices and our decisions, when we all come into the world the same way, not necessarily based on our decision, but based upon somebody else's. But then as we grow up and we grow into adolescence and into adulthood, we actually become sort of the sum of our choices, the sum of our decisions over time. That's what our life is made up of. It's what we experience on a day-to-day basis. Yes, of course, there are external factors, but our decision-making and our choices play such an incredible and crucial part in how we actually live out our daily lives. And there's I look at it from sort of two perspectives. There's sort of the big decisions that we get to make, sort of like in the Choose Your Own Adventure books, those sort of big decisions that push you down a life path. And then there's the smaller decisions, the choices that we're making on a daily basis. And I think that sometimes I personally can have this sort of paralysis by analysis when it comes to the big decisions. I get stuck. I get mentally stuck. I know there's been many times in my life that I can think of where I'm like, I can choose one of these two paths, and I've sort of agonized over it, allowed it to cause me stress. Maybe I'm losing sleep because it's a fairly large decision. It's going to maybe dictate where I'm going to spend the next couple of years of my life. Maybe it's to do with a job, could potentially be to do with getting married. Maybe you're choosing where you're going to college or university. They're big decisions. And I've allowed that to sort of stall me in making the decision making, but I've also given it just an incredible amount of mental energy and space. And I think that can be really detrimental because yes, you need to be able to, properly make that decision. And I think that's a whole nother talk when it comes to big decisions. But so often I put all this mental energy, and maybe you're like me, into the big decision, but don't put anywhere near the same amount of mental energy into the smaller decisions that need to be made afterwards that are actually going to help make that big decision a success. Let me talk you through a couple of examples. Let's say that you're in that place in life where you're deciding whether or not to go to or where you'd like to go to college or university. It's a big decision. It's where you're going to spend the next 4+ years of your life. You're going to meet incredible people through that. Hopefully you're going to develop a skill set, learn a lot through that process, but it's a big decision. But the big decision of where to go to college or university actually doesn't become effective if you don't manage that decision after you've made it. So you say you decide to go to school, maybe it's away from home and you found this incredible program, but what's actually going to make you successful through that program is not the fact that you chose to go to that school. It's what you do once you actually get there. It's what you do on a daily basis, whether you choose to party your time away and not sleep, or are you actually going to develop some study habits? Are you actually going to learn something? Are you going to engage with the process? Are you going to engage with people and actually meet people and develop contacts and networks? I know that's one of the biggest things that's come out of university for me when I had the opportunity to go, was the people that I got to connect with and I've been able to keep in touch with over all these years. It's been a huge influence in my life and a big, big win. But those were intentional connection points. Those were intentional decisions that I look back on my university time and I can say, yes, that was successful because I was able to do X, Y, and Z as I went through that process. I was able to develop some daily habits as I went through that time. It wasn't because the school that I chose to go to that helped me to view that as a success or not, or help me to springboard into the life that I had. The school didn't define that. I defined that on the decisions based upon what I made. Another really big choice that we make, and I've touched on this obviously, is the person that you're going to marry, the person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with. It's a big decision. It should keep you up at night, absolutely. But when we make that decision and we put so much emphasis in our Western culture on that decision, on the wedding, on the big day and everything, and we think that, man, you get that right, and then you're just going to walk into marriage, and then you're going to celebrate your 10-year anniversary, your 20-year anniversary, and your 30-year anniversary. And now being married, obviously, I'm learning very clearly that's not the way it works. If I had the most incredible wedding, perfect venue, and I think my wife and I had a beautiful wedding, but the beauty of that day isn't going to actually define the success of the marriage. It's going to be what happens on a daily basis. It's going to be what I'm learning and continuing to learn in my years of being married to my wife. As we learn to communicate together, as we have a common vision, as we face challenges together and go through them. It's how we live out our days together married, not just the decision to get married, that's actually going to allow that to be successful. Does that sort of make sense to you? And I've needed this reminder kind of time and again. It's not just the big decision, but the sort of follow through of each one of those decisions that's helping to define my life. I know there's still a lot more that we could talk about when it comes to our choices, but I did want to touch on one thing here at the end to wrap up. It's the idea of taking responsibility for the choices that we've made. I think that there's sort of two options when we come to a point in life where we're frustrated in a situation or frustrated with our circumstances. We have the opportunity, and I do this, I need to be reminded of this often. I have the opportunity to take responsibility for the choices that have gotten me thus far, or I can choose to blame my circumstances. The problem is that if I choose to blame my circumstances, and that could be any variety of things that are outside of my control, I take away the opportunity for me to do something about it. So if I blame my circumstances on the weather, the economy, my spouse, whatever it is, then all of a sudden I can't actually do anything to potentially fix that situation. And I don't want to do that because I want to have that opportunity. I want to have that choice to be able to take a next step. And I think about my wife and I, and we've got a couple of kids. And it's fun and it's exciting and it's busy, and there are days where I get tired and I'm like, I'm not always in the best mindset, or I potentially get frustrated. But if I look at it from a realistic perspective, step back, my wife and I were blessed. We chose to have children, and we had the opportunity, and we're blessed to have children. So now we made that choice. Now I need to take responsibility for that choice. And even though there are days that are going to be challenging or days that are harder, I need to take responsibility for that choice and see through the opportunity to be a good father, a good husband, a good parent, to help raise those children in the way that God has called me to, and to be able to help them to pursue what God calls them to in their life. That's a big calling. I don't think I had any concept of what that decision or choice that we made to have children was actually going to be like as we saw it through, but it was my decision, so I do need to take responsibility for it. I do get to see that all the way through. So I wanted to encourage you with that. It's something that I need to be reminded of all the time, and I continue to get reminders and be reminded to take responsibility for my choices. Have an absolutely awesome week. You are blessed. God has an incredible call over your life, and I look forward to sharing with you next week. Talk to you soon.